dedicated to educating the public about ranked choice voting, which is going to be very important for us to understand. In 2009, he served on the executive committee of a ranked choice voting statewide ballot question campaign in Massachusetts. Adam serves on the boards of Mass Vote and Common Cause Massachusetts and has been involved in lobbying and organizing around various voting and democracy reforms for over 10 years. Bless you. No. Adam works full-time as a civic technologist and web software engineer. Beginning in 2012, he created the first searchable public database, which I think is what we're looking at here, of official election statistics on behalf of the Secretary of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and 3 other states. He holds a BA in history from BU. Thank you so much for joining us, Adam. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Allison. Thank you, everyone, for having me tonight. This is, I think, the biggest living room I've ever seen. Really neat. Okay, so what we just did was a search on this handy little database that I want you all to know about. This is actually my inspiration for advocating for ranked choice voting. I wanted to find out how many elections in Massachusetts have a winner who wins with less than a majority of voters supporting them. Those numbers are quite high, and I'm going to get into that. We have some big problems in our elections that I'm going to talk about, but just so folks know about this, this has every election at your fingertips that's reported to the Secretary of the Commonwealth, Bill Galvin, federal, state, down ballot races, who's run, how many votes they got down to the precinct level. It has ballot questions as well if you want to do research on that. So a lot of folks in the political space use this to strategize about winning elections. And from my day job as a civic technologist, I think it's everyone's right who's paying taxes to have the government collect this data to get access to it 24/7. Anytime. So I just wanted folks to know about it. The URL for this is ma.electionstats.com. It redirects to electionstats.state.ma.us, the government website. But anyway, so talk to me about that after. If we could switch over to the slideshow, and then we'll talk about the actual topic I'm here to talk about, which is ranked choice voting. So let's see, raise your hand if you've ever been in the voting booth and you've had a bit of a dilemma where you really wanted to vote for someone, but you knew there would be a spoiler or you'd be throwing your vote away. Raise your hand up high. Wow, pretty much everybody. That solution, the solution to that has existed for a very long time. But it's just a matter of political will that we haven't really got it in Massachusetts, except for Cambridge, which has been using a variant of ranked choice voting since 1941. This system has been used in Australia for over a century to elect members to their federal House of Representatives. So it's not a new experiment. It's actually quite an old innovation. And it's a very exciting one that promises to utterly transform politics as we know it. Raise your hand if you're sick and tired of mudslinging and toxic campaign rhetoric. Yes. This is probably the only solution that I've ever seen that provides natural incentives for candidates to carry themselves respectfully towards other candidates, because it's a system of rankings where a candidate wants to pick up voters' second and third rankings, and so they can pick up the rankings of their opponent's base. And so they do not want to mudsling their opponent and alienate their supporters. So I'm going to get into a little more details about that in a minute, but it's a very exciting thing. And so let's see. Okay, so who we are. We're a 501c3 educational nonprofit talking about voting systems that increase equality for all and improve outcomes. We are focused right now on ranked choice voting for single seat offices. So Cambridge uses it for city council. Thank you. But we're looking to use it for federal, state offices, single seat offices like U.S. Senate, U.S. House, Governor, etc., all the way down the line. But we just want to show people what's amazing about this, and then communities can think about it for themselves, how it can be applied. And so the basic problem here is a spoiler problem. Raise your hand if you recognize this election. Okay. So we're all too familiar, painfully familiar with this election and the problem that it brought out of our system, of our primitive plurality system. We have Bush and Gore with a 537 vote difference, and Nader getting almost 100,000 votes. So we all know the story here. Nader is the spoiler. He siphoned off the majority and changed the outcome just by being in the race. So it's not just that he's a spoiler, he's a kingmaker. A kingmaker is someone who is very unpopular, but has tremendous power. They can decide who actually wins the election. Nader gets to decide. If I stay in, Al Gore has a very high likelihood of losing because I'm going to siphon off his support. If I step out, Al Gore can consolidate that majority support and win. Now, what kind of crazy system would allow the least popular candidate to lord over the outcome, particularly for the highest, most powerful office on the planet? Our system. Next example, state level example. We have the Democratic primary for governor. Raise your hand if you're familiar with this race. Okay. Sorry if your arm is tired. I could ask you that. Coakley is the front runner, and we have Steve Grossman and Don Berwick. And you could say Coakley is kind of the safe choice. She was already held elected office. She was pretty well known. She's a household name. Grossman and Berwick, you could argue, are a bit more on the progressive end of the spectrum. And so we have a potential situation where Grossman and Berwick split the majority. Now we don't have exit polling data to back this up. We do have some anecdotal evidence of Berwick supporters that talk about how Steve Grossman's my strong second choice. They're already thinking in terms of rankings. I supported Berwick at the convention. I'm so frightened that Coakley will blow yet another campaign. I'm leaning toward Grossman just to block her, and et cetera, et cetera. And so we have a problem in even our primaries where the Democratic Party would greatly benefit from this sort of system because it ensures the winner gets a majority. So this actually strengthens the Democratic Party because whoever wins under a ranked choice voting election has to have more than 50% of the vote. They're a stronger candidate. We're assured that they're the strongest candidate. They go to the general election with that show of strength. They also show the base that they're strong, and that they incentivize people to come out and work for them, do the doors, and all of the volunteering that needs to be done. Third and final example here, the Boston mayoral preliminary election, 2013. We had a wonderful, diverse field. Many candidates of color came out. Boston was now a majority-minority city, which is very exciting, so that reflected in the candidate pool. But what happened? 2 white Irish men won that preliminary, that top 2. And one of them, Mayor Walsh, went on to become mayor. Because many candidates of color split the vote from communities of common interest, Roxbury, JP, Dorchester, Mattapan, and Boston. So this was such a problem that the frontrunner, Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, her supporters were found by the Globe talking about how can we pressure other candidates of color, specifically, to drop out, make way for her, so she can consolidate the support from those communities. Now, in an era where we're trying to encourage historically disenfranchised groups to participate, to vote, to run for office, to represent their communities, that is the exact last thing we need to be doing. Why are we doing this? Because our system does not accommodate a crowded field. Voters only have one vote. All those candidates. So one would think that more candidates representing a majority of a community would mean that that community has more power, but it's the opposite. The more candidates that run who are similar, they split up majorities and they weaken one another. So it's a paradox of our plurality system. So these are just 3 examples. When you zoom out, and this is what that database was for, when you look at candidates where there's 3 or more, races where there's 3 or more candidates, you have very high instances of non-majority winners, people who win with less than 50% of the vote. 60% of governors' races in the last 20 years that were competitive, that had 3 or more candidates, resulted in non-majority winners. 44% of state representative contests, primaries and generals. So we blame voters who want to vote for candidates they truly believe in because they're spoilers, they're siphoning off votes. We're blaming candidates who want to run and have the right to run. Everyone should run who wants to. We have anemic competition for our state house seats. We are 50th place in the United States, Massachusetts, for competitiveness for state representative offices. We have so little competition. So we blame people who want to run. We need to blame the system. and it fails on all these counts. A negative campaign I'll get into. So, ranked choice voting is simple. Instead of voting for one, it allows you to rank your candidates in the order you prefer them. First choice, second choice, third choice, and so on. Raise your hand if that's unclear. Great. Raise your hand if this ballot is unclear. Okay, so let me explain. So let's say I'm looking at my ballot. Let's see, I love candidate 2. So just like I vote now, I can vote with a ranked ballot. I can pick them first. I just fill in that number 1 bubble. That's my first choice, my favorite. Now I can stop right there. I can vote how I vote in the old school way, the plurality way, and I'm done. But if I want the benefit of backup choices, I'm going to fill in who I think would be a good second choice. If my first choice, candidate 2, does not have the support to continue, I want my vote to transfer. So I like candidate 1 second best. I'm going to fill out bubble number 2 next to candidate 1. And if I hate candidate 3, I'll leave them off, but if I can tolerate them, I'll put them as my third ranking. That makes sense?
Yes.
Great. So another way to say this is that you can still vote how you vote now, but you get the added benefit of having a series of backup choices. All right, ready? Counting. Should I skip this in terms of time?
It was 8, so I think we're good. Yeah. You keep going. You're
Keep
doing
going.
great. Yeah.
Okay. So let's say we have a ranked choice voting election, and the clerk gets everybody's ballot, and they count only the first choice rankings. This is how a ranked choice voting election is counted. The clerk counts only first choices, does not look at the rankings. If any candidate has a majority of first choice votes, the election is over because we achieved the goal of the system, which is a majority, more than 50% support. Done. Don't look at the rankings. We have a great, very strongly supported winner who's going to go on to govern. However, in the event that no candidate wins the majority of those first choice votes, this is where ranked choice voting shines. And the process is very simple. It's also known as instant runoff voting. Raise your hand if you've heard of that. A couple of folks. Good. Instant runoff. So it's a runoff election. It's actually a series of runoff rounds that occurs instantly. It occurs in a single election. So a lot of folks are familiar with runoffs because you go, like that Boston mayoral, you go out for the preliminary, and then 2 people win, the top 2, and then voters have to come out again for the final. That's a runoff, but it's a manual runoff, and everybody pays more because we're paying for 2 elections, and turnout is lower because you have to schlep out to 2 elections. Instant runoff happens in a single election. That's basically the difference.
Yeah.
So in order to tabulate this, you basically know it as a majority, you eliminate the lowest vote getter, you look at those voters' next choice on those ballots, and you transfer those votes to that next choice because their first choice has been eliminated. So who do we eliminate here?
5%.
The 5% light orange candidate, right. And so for purposes of our example, we're saying that those are orangey voters, so all of them have voted bold orange as their second choice. Those candidates are kind of similar in some orangey way. And so bold orange gets to capture the voters who wanted a combination of those candidates. They had some overlap in their platform. So now we check for a majority. If there's a majority winner, the election is over. Is there a majority winner?
No.
No. So we do the exact same thing again. It's very simple. We eliminate the lowest vote getter, which is
20.
the 20% light purple. And those are purpley voters. And they wanted a combination of purple policy, and 2 candidates were in the field to represent purple policy. So voters had this devil's bargain, but with ranked choice voting, they can rest easy because they can vote for both of them. And so now the true majority winner emerges. But when we have a primitive plurality ballot, the true majority winner is buried. We never know who it is. So the ballot, a ranked ballot, reflects more accurately who we are, what we stand for, how we feel about the candidates. It's not just this one and done, pick one and pray crapshoot where you have to look at polling and make all sorts of strategic decisions who has the best shot at winning. And you have to compromise your true values, your true feelings about the candidates. So the true Representative of the people is dark purple. Any questions?
This is going to be, but what happens with the electoral college? That's still...
Yes. So states, this does not impact the electoral college. States can use this system for their internal, and this is just president, so this system you can use for any office, but states can still do the winner-take-all system if they choose, and then do a ranked choice voting election to decide their majority presidential favorite. Or you could do a national ranked choice voting election, but we're way far from that. All right, so I won't go into the video because I think that was Nader as their first choice and Gore as their second choice. Nader's the lowest vote getter, gets eliminated. His votes transfer to Gore. Gore consolidates the majority that always wanted a combination of him and Nader, rather than it being split off and the majority gets thwarted. Here's one of my favorite examples. Take that in for a minute. So ranked choice voting would have allowed Bernie Sanders to run as an independent in the general election, or Mike Bloomberg. Only would this have completely transformed the tone and tenor of that general election. It may have changed the outcome. We're not making any claims either way. But we do know that Bernie captivated millions of Americans, millions of voters, and we do know that there were 2 million Democratic voters who did turn out in 2012, but did not turn out at all for the 2016 general election. So the number one driver of voter turnout is good campaigns. So you let good people run who want to run and represent a large swath of the base, and you're going to have a lot more people participating and staying engaged with our politics. And then, of course, our Boston mayoral election, you can vote for that combination of candidates from communities of interest. You're saving the municipality money because you're combining 2 elections into 1. You have more turnout. Nobody's demonized. It's a spoiler. Everybody wins. So negative campaigning. So right now we have candidates who are trained to go negative in order to differentiate themselves from their opponents, to whip up their base, get volunteers out, and just get just enough votes to win beyond the person behind them. With ranked choice voting, if you go negative, you're going to lose second and third rankings from voters. You might be doing doors for your candidate, and then the person at the door says, sorry, I'm actually voting for their opponent. That's not the end of the conversation of ranked choice voting. Say, well, ma'am, my candidate has this, this, and this in common with you. Maybe you could vote for my candidate second. So and what you don't do is attack their choice, because then you're going to alienate them and not pick up those rankings. So you're naturally incentivized to stay positive, to reach for causes that people have in common, to garner somewhere on that voter's ballot. How much time?
Just a couple more minutes.
Okay.
This will be time for questions. Maybe.
All right, yeah, absolutely. So here's some ballots from around the country. Raise your hand if you know about this, that Maine enacted ranked choice voting last November. Very, very powerful moment in U.S. history. First state in our nation's history to do this. This was like the match that sparked our movement here. They passed this at the ballot, and there's articles in the back you can pick up for all federal and state offices besides president, and we can talk about that in a minute. Ranked choice voting has already been used in nearly 4 million, in communities representing nearly 4 million Americans, including Oakland, California, St. Paul, and Minneapolis. It's used around the world. It's used in nations representing about 1.5 billion people, most of that's India, but Australia, Ireland, UK, Canada, New Zealand, etc. It's used to select Best Picture and National Association of Women, lots of colleges and universities. So I'll skip the research for now. There's some great research that show what voters get out of it. I'll go to our campaign. We started with a little mailing list of 200. We're now at 6,500. We have 1,500 volunteer signups. I would love to have you folks signed up with us. Ryan, in the back here, Ryan is our Northeast Regional Lead. So he's your point person if you want to do some organizing with us here. He's going to pass out the sign-up sheets, one on each side of the room. And then you can hook up with us. We've raised some money. We've done a statewide poll. And Mr. Gus Bickford is here. I want to give him a shout out. He's the chair of the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party has put this on their platform as of the, yes?
I mean, how did they get it? in Maine it was passed.
Yep.
How did it get passed? Does it have to go through the legislator?
Ballot question.
It's on the state ballot.
It passed on the ballot in November, last November.
So what is the goal here in Mass?
So the goal is we'll eventually to be doing the same thing, but we have a lot of education because as you folks know, not a lot of people know about it. So this is what we're doing, speaking tours.
So when do you think it would be on the?
Likely 2020. So we're taking a lot of upfront time to make sure folks know about it. Yes.
I have a question. Because I know there's this general concern about fraud in the ballot system.
Yep.
And with so many extra dots, to fill in.
Yep.
I'm wondering if any kind of bill that's proposed would take into account, like, this is going to reduce our cost of holding elections, and we're going to shift some extra funds to oversight of elections and,
Interesting.
hand ballot counting and things like that, so that people feel more secure that their vote is actually going to be counted. That's part of why we would want this process in the first place.
Yeah, we haven't made that argument in terms of the cost savings we go into this particular issue. But I mean, my personal solution for the problem of fraud is make sure ballots, anonymous ballots, are public record. Put them online, let anyone do a verifiable third-party audit. There's companies that have the technology to do this. It's trivial. Each ballot is a tiny JPEG, and that can be solved. Yes.
Last one.
Last one?
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's great, good.
So you work with the state election system, is that true?
I've created the statewide database that the Secretary of Commonwealth uses, yeah.
Okay. So you don't do it. All right.
All right, great. That was easy.
Thank you so much for coming.